Alright, as we continue through the Disney animated features, we finally get to a Xerox processed movie that I actually kind of like. The Jungle Book. Now, The Jungle Book came out in 1967 and is the last Disney animated feature that Walt was a part of and actually saw completed before he died. And if you can indulge me in some wild speculation for a minute, I get the feeling watching this movie that Walt had a much more involved role in this film compared to the last couple, namely 101 Dalmatians and Sword in the Stone. And I'm pretty sure that's the case because unlike those movies that were kind of just like, oh, what's the next kind of story we want to tell? And he kind of more or less trusted his chief animators and directors into handling all of that business. And also there was a whole situation with Disneyland. The Jungle Book was a story that Walt had been workshopping and had been a big fan of for a long time, and he always wanted to make an animated movie about it, but never quite had the right story, the right timing, and he just kept getting pushed back until finally Disneyland is up and running. It's a big success, and now he can actually really get hands-on with this movie. And you can tell because Walt Disney, above all else, was such a great storyteller. He knew how to weave a narrative together. And ever since Around Sleeping Beauty, a lot of these stories haven't had that guiding hand of a master storyteller. And The Jungle Book has that, and even though it is kind of a road trip movie, a lot like Alice in Wonderland was, the movie does still have momentum, and it's helped by a bunch of likable, colorful characters that you meet along the way. Oh, and I should also say that this is not the most accurate adaptation of Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book stories, which if you want to see that, Chuck Jones actually did a very good job in animating that, and the Chuck Jones Jungle Book is really good, and I highly recommend checking that out if you want something closer to the book. But for me, what the Disney version lacks in that darker tone more than is made up for in the personality of all the characters. So let's dive right in. Now, when I watched this movie again for this review, it had been some time since I've seen it. It's not like I never watched it since childhood, but it's been like a year or so, it started to get a little fuzzy. But when I turned this on, the opening credits started, I knew something was different, and it's the backgrounds. The backgrounds in the Jungle Book are probably the most beautiful thing in the whole movie, and really is a step up from the backgrounds that we got in Sword in the Stone and 101 Dalmatians. Both of those movies went with a more sketchy style to match the sketchier animation on the characters, which I've already covered at length in both of those videos, but here they go back to the more painterly style of the golden and some of the silver age of Disney animation. It really looks good, and on top of that, they bring back the multiplane camera. Yeah, it never really officially left, but we had been seeing less and less of it over time. But here it comes back in a big way, especially in these opening credits, because you have layers of the jungle and the ruins and just the different settings that we're going to see later in the film. And like those Disney movies of old, it does a great job of immersing you into this world. You feel like you're in there, just like how in Bambi you felt like you were in the woods. Here you feel like you're in the jungle. But sadly, it is kind of a double-edged sword because the better the backgrounds look, it just kind of makes the sketchiness of the character animation. And I shouldn't really be too hard on the character animation here because the designs are fun, they're colorful, they're lively, and they're creative. And it looks like the animators are actually making more of an attempt to clean up their lines before they send it in to be Xerox processed, but it's still not perfect, and especially in moments where there's a lot of movement going around, a lot of quick animation, you do start to see those sketch lines come through a little bit more. So it's still not entirely gone. They haven't fixed the problem. But I will say it isn't as distracting as in those other movies, probably because the characters are a lot more fun. So let's start talking about them. So the first character that we're introduced to is Bagheera the Panther, voiced by Sebastian Cabot. Through voiceover, he kind of starts off as this kind of omnipresent narrator, and then we find out, yeah, it is Bagheera, and he's narrating, and he's looking after this baby who just got abandoned by this creek, and he sends it to a family of wolves to get raised, and you know this story. But then the big scary tiger Shere Khan is seen roaming these woods, and that spooks the wolves, and they're like, oh, we gotta get rid of this man cub because Shere Khan hates man, and Mowgli's gonna be in danger, and if he's in danger, the whole pack is in danger. So really, for the betterment of the pack, it's good for Mowgli to just go off to the man village and be a man and distance himself. And from there to the end of the movie, the whole plot is just trying to get Mowgli to the man village. Bagheera says that he'll get him there, and then we run into all these different obstacles, some of them external, some of them Mowgli just really not wanting to go because he's a 10-year-old boy and he's lived in the jungle all his life, and really, why would he want to go to a man village? Because to him, they're boring. But my favorite part about this setup, this whole first act, is that we don't see Shere Khan right away. We hear about him, he's established as a presence, but we never see him. We just hear people talk about him and hear about his reputation and how much he hates man. He fears the guns and the fire. And he's been talked up so much that you just have this anticipation building in you, like, oh, what does he look like? What kind of a tiger is he? But before we get to Shere Khan, we actually have another antagonist, Kaa the python, and he's voiced by Sterling Holloway, which is a weird choice, but I kind of get it. When I was a kid, I didn't really get it. Like, why is the sweet, cuddly voice of Winnie the Pooh the voice of this python that wants to eat Mowgli? And then after watching it a few times, it kind of made sense, where it's like, yeah, this python, he's seductive. Maybe seductive isn't the right word. He's hypnotizing. He wants to coax you into this false sense of security, and he's got the weird eye thing, and you just fall into a trance so they can eat you. So you wouldn't want a kind of villainous voice. You want something sweet and calming to kind of lull you into this state. And Sterling Holloway is a good choice for that. We actually have two encounters with Kaa. The first one pretty early in the film, and then he comes back later, and then we get the Trust in Me song, and that is just a great song. It's really cool. You really understand the full hypnotic power of Kaa, and it's just kind of fun to see all the jokes that they can make with just how freaking long he is, because Kaa, I don't know to this day how long Kaa is supposed to be. It kind of changes depending on the camera angle and depending on the requirement for the joke, but he could span at least like 30 feet long. That's pretty intense. But like I said before, this is a road trip movie, a new animal every 5 minutes or so, and the next one is Colonel Hati and his elephant brigade. And while the song is fun and the little interaction with the baby elephant is kind of cute, I feel like this scene doesn't really amount to much, and it kind of feels like filler. And it's even stranger because like how we see them twice, we see them again later once Shere Khan comes on the scene, but even then they really don't do much. They don't become a threat to Mowgli. They don't become an ally, even though the second time we see them, Shere Khan is in the jungle. We've seen him. He's listening in on what the elephants have to say. And I couldn't help but think, why didn't they have the elephants play a even small role in the climax as an ally to Mowgli? Because that is kind of set up in the beginning of the movie that, yeah, they're kind of on decent terms. So it would have been really cool to see them play some kind of role in that big confrontation with Shere Khan, and you see the animals come out to help Mowgli. Kind of like they did in the live-action remake, and to this day I still think that the Jungle Book live-action remake is the one live-action remake that Disney has done that is quantifiably better than the original. But this is not a review of that, this is a review of the original, so I promise I won't reference that too many times. But the whole idea of the elephants coming back in the climax I think was a big missed opportunity here. But the movie does get quite a bit better when we're introduced to Baloo, played by Phil Harris, and he is such a breath of fresh air to this movie. Phil Harris brings such a comforting, laid-back energy to this character that as soon as you meet him, you're like, this is a dude that I just want to hang out with every day and just have a good time, and I want him to be my friend. And it makes you really identify with Mowgli in this situation, because in a very short amount of time, you feel the bond between Mowgli and Baloo, that they are best friends. And Baloo is actually kind of a surrogate father figure, which is interesting because they already had two of them. There was Rama the wolf and there was Bagheera the panther, and they do work. They do serve the story really well. And I feel like that was definitely Walt's input, where you need this kind of family dynamic, this Baloo, Bagheera bickering with each other and trying to debate what's best to be done with Mowgli. And really that element is what makes this movie work for me. Above just being a fun romp through the jungle, meeting all these colorful characters, that family dynamic is the core. And it's really effective considering that Mowgli has only spent one day with Baloo and he already has such a deep bond. I don't know, maybe that's just the power of the Bare Necessities song, which is a fantastic song, probably the best song in the whole movie. But that isn't my favorite song in the movie. That honor has to go to the song that the next character that we're introduced to, King Louie, sings, and it's I Want to Be Like You. And King Louie, he's the king of the swingers, king of the monkeys, is this big orangutan, and he's voiced by Louie Prima. And something you should know about me is that I was obsessed with monkeys and apes and gorillas when I was a kid, and to some degree I still am. Gorillas are still hands down my favorite animal. They're just so cool. So when I was a kid, whenever we get to the King Louie section, that was always the best part of the movie. And watching it as an adult, it's still a lot of fun. The monkeys are chaotic, yeah. Are they the most organized people? No, but the song is absurdly catchy, and when you're listening to it, you just kind of want to bounce along to it a little bit. But something that always kind of bothered me about the character of King Louie himself is his design, because he's clearly supposed to be an orangutan, but he looks like a female orangutan, because the males have the big old puffy face look going on and the goatee, and King Louie doesn't really have that. It always kind of threw me off. Even as a kid, I knew that male orangutans had the weird face, and I was like, well, what's King Louie supposed to be? I guess I should probably talk about the controversy surrounding this scene in the movie. So much so that Disney Plus felt the need to put up a big old disclaimer in front of this movie telling everybody how culturally insensitive and racist it is. And they're talking about the monkeys, which seems to be the online chatter surrounding it. I legitimately don't understand what they're talking about, because the claim is that the depiction of the monkeys here is offensive to black people, especially like jazz musicians like Louis Armstrong. I don't think that's what's going on here. Yeah, there's jazz and swing influence in here, but the voice actor for King Louie is a legit jazz musician named Louie Prima, and I only found this out recently. He's white, he's Italian. All the references in this movie are specific, timely 1967 references to Louie Prima and his band, a white jazz band. So there's no racial component here at all. It's all just a reference to Louie Prima, who was a very popular musician of the day, and the trumpet and the conga line at the end are all references to tropes that he did with his band at live events. And even though I am on the record saying that I don't think a lot of what Disney has deemed insensitive is really that bad or really even warrants that big disclaimer at the start of the movie, I can at least understand why the crows in Dumbo might make people uncomfortable, or the Indians in Peter Pan. But here, the monkeys, I don't see that at all. And for me, it feels like they're going out of their way looking for stuff to be offended by, rather than just seeing it for what it is, which is a pretty fun, entertaining tribute to Louie Prima and his band. But now finally, at the 47-minute mark, the beginning of the third act, we finally see Shere Khan the tiger, and he's voiced by George Sanders. And a lot of you might not know who George Sanders is, but I am actually a huge fan of his. He was in the original Samson and Delilah. He was the original Mr. Freeze in the 60s Batman. He just has such a chilling voice and dominating presence that every time he walks into a room, even in animated form, he is in charge of the situation. And Shere Khan doesn't disappoint. This is a beautifully animated tiger with such arrogance and pride that when Mowgli finally challenges him to a fight, he's like, okay, I'll give you a head start. It makes the chase more fun. And when Mowgli doesn't run, he gets offended and he starts getting mad, and then boom, the fight is on. Oh, and I completely skipped over the vultures in this movie, because they ultimately don't contribute a lot. They're just kind of there. But kind of like how the monkeys were a tribute to Louis Prima, the vultures are a weird tribute to the Beatles. I don't know why or where that comes from, but it's there and it's kind of funny, and it's something I never noticed as a kid. But of course, Shere Khan's defeated because Mowgli picks up this burning twig that got struck by lightning, and now he's got fire. He's a man. He's officially become the thing that Shere Khan fears the most, and he ties it to his tail, and Shere Khan freaks out and he runs away. And while that climax is intense and it's fun, it's the one part in this movie that I really wish it had just a slightly darker tone. I don't know, maybe do something like they did with Tarzan and the Leopard, where it's not gory, it's not over the top. You do get a sense of finality that Shere Khan is defeated and dead and Mowgli's victorious. But it's not bad, and then the movie ends officially when Mowgli sees this young woman by the stream, and she's getting water, and she kind of gives him the flirty eyes, and he's kind of taken back. This is the first human woman he's ever seen, and he's kind of infatuated with her, and he kind of follows her into the village, and he looks back and you see Baloo and Bagheera giving him, well, let's just say mixed signals. But, you know, you can't fight human nature, so he follows her into the village, ending the movie. And like I said in the beginning, I actually really do like this one. And even though I made it very clear that I just don't like the Xerox process and how it looks in execution, I think it was a fine idea, but 9 times out of 10, when it's executed, it just looks cheap. And yeah, I do still feel that way about The Jungle Book, but the beautiful backgrounds, the Sherman Brothers music, and just the fun atmosphere, likable characters, the memorable moments kind of make up for that, in my opinion. And it is a Disney movie that I will watch every so often and always have a good time. Now I turn over to you guys. What do you think about The Jungle Book? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And as always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.